Story 1. The Red Lantern at Raven's Gap. You ever notice when a forest goes completely quiet, like someone hit mute on the world? And you just know something's watching you? That's what happened to me near Raven's Gap last October, and I've never heard birdsong the same since. I was hiking solo, like I always do when I'm burned out from IT work in Asheville. I head east, pick an old trail near Grandfather Mountain, and try to lose cell signal. That day, I took an unofficial game trail some locals call the silent track. It wasn't on maps, but I'd read about it in an old hikers forum where a user posted coordinates, then never posted again. Just as I reached the dense laurel tunnel near the ridge, all sound cut out. No squirrels, no breeze, no birds, not even the crunch of my boots. I stopped, turned off my GoPro, and listened. That's when I noticed it. An old red lantern hanging from a crooked birch, unlit but gently swinging. There was no wind. I moved toward it, heart thudding. Beneath the lantern, wedged into the tree's roots, was a rusty tin lunchbox. Inside, a child's drawing, yellowed with age. It showed stick figures huddled in a circle, and one in the center with no face. I stuffed it in my pack, stupidly curious. And that's when I heard it. A low rattling, like a breath through teeth. The trees around me shimmered like heat was bending them. I turned to leave, but the trail behind me had changed. Laurel branches twisted inwards, creating a tunnel of thorns. I ran, scraping my arms and legs until I burst out onto the gravel access road. Later, back home, I found a name scrawled on the back of the drawing: Eliza, age 9, 1964. I Googled it. A girl named Eliza Withers disappeared on that ridge in '64. They never found her body, but her lunchbox was mentioned in the original search reports. I'd found what they hadn't. I returned it to the ranger station. The next morning, a ranger called me, voice trembling, saying the box was gone. Just vanished. I haven't gone back. But every now and then, in the middle of a crowded street, I'll hear nothing. Complete, empty silence. And I know the forest is listening. Story 2, The Man Under the Ferns, in Lost Dog Hollow. I didn't believe in omens until the forest silenced me. It was June, and I'd driven from Charleston to Lost Dog Hollow in West Virginia. My first solo camping trip after my divorce. My therapist called it a reset. I called it hiding. The trail was a narrow, overgrown logging path that hadn't seen boots in decades, hidden behind a rusted cattle gate and marked with only a single faded wooden sign: Pond Ridge. It was quiet when I entered, but the birds still chirped, and I had music in one AirPod to keep the nerves down. I'd gone about 2 miles in when, snap, the music cut out, battery dead. I popped the bud out and immediately noticed the silence. Not calm, peaceful quiet. This was unnatural, pressure in your ears kind of silence. Then I saw the ferns. There were dozens of them, just past a fallen log, arranged in a circular pattern around a bare patch of soil. In the center lay a man's body. At least, that's what it looked like. Pale, motionless, skin stretched taut. I gasped, but when I stepped forward, he blinked. Just once. Then he slowly rolled away and sank into the dirt like it was water. I screamed. I backed up and fell onto my pack. When I scrambled back to my feet, there were no ferns, no circle, just forest. Normal, chirping birds again. I ran back down the trail and didn't stop till I hit my truck, scratching up my arms on branches. I didn't talk about it. Who would believe it? But a week later, a ranger from the Monongahela National Forest emailed me. She said my emergency beacon had pinged briefly that afternoon in an area they call the Dead Ring. She asked what I'd seen. I told her everything. Her only reply was, "That makes 3 sightings this year. Don't go back." That night, I checked the ferns in my backyard. Nothing unusual. But ever since, I wake up at 1:13 a.m. sharp, and the sound of something brushing against my window always follows. Just soft, slow. Like fern leaves swaying in air that doesn't move. Story 3, The Fog at Dead Elk Bend. There's a curve on the Appalachian Trail near Waynesboro, Virginia, that locals call Dead Elk Bend. Hikers rarely mention it by name, but everyone who's passed through knows the spot. It's a narrow ridge where the trail clings to the edge of a steep drop, with a thick canopy overhead. I'd been through that stretch 3 times during my section hikes, but in July 2024, it felt different. I was hiking solo again, prepping for my southbound through hike next season. The sun was still up, around 6:45 p.m., but a fog rolled in from nowhere, thick and gray-green, sinking low over the trail like smoke. The birds went quiet in one slow wave, their chirps dying out like a falling whistle. That's when I noticed the air itself wasn't moving. No wind, no insects, just stillness. I kept going. Headlamp flicked on even though it wasn't dark yet, and I started hearing footsteps behind me. Not animals scurrying, human, heel first, rhythmically keeping pace with mine. I turned around 3 times. Nothing. The 4th time, I saw him. A figure in an old flannel shirt and tattered jeans, maybe 50 feet behind, standing between the trees and staring. I froze. He didn't move. I shouted, "Hey!" and waved. Nothing. The fog curled tighter around my legs, and I started walking faster, then running. The figure stayed the same distance behind me, no matter how fast I moved, until I burst into a clearing where the fog vanished instantly. I turned back. Gone. The birdsong returned. I kept going, trying to rationalize it as a hallucination, until I met an older hiker the next morning, camped near Humpback Rocks. I told him about the fog. He paused, chewed his oatmeal, and said, "I saw the same man in 1998. Same spot. He never gets closer, just follows you until the fog breaks." I asked if anyone had ever spoken to him. The man just shook his head. "They say it's the spirit of an old miner who got lost in that ravine back in 1872. When he looks at you, he's measuring how much longer you'll last out here." He stirred his pot and muttered, "You must have passed his test. This time." Story 4, The Hollow at Whispering Pines. The 4th time the birds went dead quiet, I was camping at a site deep in the Nantahala Forest, just west of Franklin, North Carolina. Near a landmark the older AT hikers call Whispering Pines Hollow. It's not on any official map, but the name gets passed around in trail journals and the occasional late-night fireside warning. I was with my buddy Jake, a Marine-turned-wilderness survivalist who didn't believe in anything he couldn't hold or shoot. We'd been bushwhacking off-trail for about a day and stumbled across a glade filled with pine trees so old and tall they blocked out the moonlight entirely. The silence there was immediate, not gradual, like we had stepped into a soundproof box. Even Jake paused and muttered, "Something's off here." I shrugged it off, but the air had an odd metallic taste, like blood on a coin. We set up camp anyway. Around 1 a.m., we were both wide awake, not talking, not sleeping, just listening. That's when the trees started whispering. No joke. You could hear breathy words woven into the breeze, like voices arguing just out of earshot. Jake grabbed his knife and flashlight and shined it into the dark. Nothing. But the voices grew sharper, whispering our names. My spine turned to ice. Jake shouted, "Shut the hell up!" And everything went silent again. We packed up by headlamp and bolted through the underbrush, not caring about trail markers or direction. The next morning, we found ourselves back in the same glade. Same trees, same spot, as if the forest had folded in on itself. But the weirdest part? The pine needles beneath our tents were undisturbed, flat, not crushed. No sign we'd ever pitched there at all. Jake never talked about it again, but I heard him mutter "whispering pines" in his sleep 3 nights later. When I told an older Cherokee guide about it months later, he paled and said the hollow was believed to be the boundary between the land of the living and the spirit world. When the birds stop and the wind talks, he said, you're standing on borrowed time. Story 5. The Singing Tree at Cades Cove. You ever hear of a tree that hums? Not from the wind, but like it's alive and trying to sing through wood. That's what brought me to the outskirts of Cades Cove one fall, right when the fog rolls in low and thick. Locals talk about a singing tree near an old forgotten side trail behind the primitive Baptist church. I was a photographer chasing Appalachian folklore, documenting the last whispers of oral legends before they died out. Alone, with just my Nikon, I followed the crumbled stones of what used to be a fence line, the birds chirping all around. But then, dead silence, like a blanket thrown over the forest. That's when I saw it. A tall, white oak with a deep scar spiraling up its bark like a burned rope. No breeze, but the tree made noise, low and mournful, like an old woman humming a hymn in mourning. I snapped a photo, and my camera shut off instantly. Not battery dead, just off. I stepped closer, my ears filled with static. The air got thick and the humming got louder, almost angry. Then I saw her, just for a flash. A woman in a bonnet and torn calico dress, clinging to the tree, her back arching unnaturally, mouth open in a silent wail. And then, she was gone. The birds started singing again. I stumbled back to town, shaken. My camera powered on without issue when I got back to the car. But that photo? Just blackness. Not underexposed, not corrupted. Just pure, inky black. I showed it to an archivist at the Great Smoky Mountains Heritage Center. She asked me where I'd found it. I told her. She swallowed hard and said the tree was once used for spirit tying, a punishment ritual where the soul of the condemned was bound to the earth. Legend says if you hear the tree sing, the soul wants to trade places. I haven't been back. But sometimes, when I close my eyes, I hear that hum, slow, aching, begging. Story 6. The Logging Road That Echoed Back. I was part of a 3-man crew hired to clear fallen timber along an abandoned fire road near Buckeye Knob, just north of Roan Mountain. Most hikers don't know this road even exists. It's barely a ghost on the oldest maps. Locals call it Echo Cut, because any noise made along it comes back wrong, like something is mimicking you in reverse. My buddy Tom had a chainsaw running all morning, and the smell of pine sap hung thick in the air. Birds were loud, warblers, thrushes, you name it. But around noon, just after Tom took a lunch break, everything stopped. No saws, no birds, just quiet. Too quiet. Even our footsteps didn't sound right, muffled like we were walking on foam. Then the echo started, but it wasn't ours. We hadn't spoken, hadn't made noise. Yet from down the hollow, we heard our names. Tom. Wes. Dragged out like someone unfamiliar with the sound of speech, testing the shape of our names. We froze. I radioed our third man, Lewis. His voice came through fine, but when we responded, all he heard was static. Tom started walking toward the source, drawn like a moth. I yanked him back and told him to listen. Another whisper. 1 down. 2 to go. That's when we ran. Back at the truck, Lewis said he never left the clearing and didn't hear a thing. But his compass had spun in circles for 20 minutes. That night, I dreamed of the trail. Same trees, same air. But Tom was walking ahead of me, deeper and deeper, into the silence, until he vanished. A year later, Tom left the job, said he couldn't shake the feeling that something had followed him back. He swore birds avoided him. And truth is, they did. No birds nested near his house, not one. When he went missing last spring, the sheriff's dogs refused to track past the trailhead. They just whimpered, then turned and sat, as if they knew the forest no longer echoed back the same way. But Story 7, The Maple Hollow Stillness. You ever notice that sometimes silence isn't just absence of noise, it's presence. It's like something arrived and pressed a heavy finger on the pause button of the world. That's what happened to me and my cousin Levi back in 2018, up at Maple Hollow near Spruce Pine, North Carolina. We were scouting deer signs and turkey roosts ahead of fall season. The hollow's known for thick undergrowth, old-growth maples, and the stone chimney of a homestead that burned down in 1902. Some say lightning hit it. Others say the woman inside locked the door and lit every lamp she had. The story goes, if you see fireflies in broad daylight near that chimney, walk away. That's her trying to guide you in. It was mid-afternoon, golden sun streaking through the canopy, birds loud with chatter. Levi called me over. He found boot prints near the chimney, fresh and facing toward it. That's when the sound shut off. Like a curtain dropped, birds stopped, breeze gone. The smell of moss and decaying leaves thickened to something sharp, metallic. I spoke Levi's name. No echo, just my voice, swallowed. Then the fireflies came, glowing green specks floating through the daylight. Levi stared and whispered, "She's calling." I grabbed him and backed away, but his boots rooted like he couldn't lift them. I yanked hard enough to knock us both over. We crawled backward, and the second we crossed a line, an invisible threshold, the bird song snapped back on like someone hit unmute. Levi threw up. I'll never forget how his face looked, like he saw something I didn't. He wouldn't go back there, ever. He told me in hushed tones weeks later. While he was frozen, he heard a woman humming, but it wasn't near him. It was inside him, like her voice echoed in his chest cavity. A tune he'd never heard, but now couldn't forget. The kicker. Months later, he died in a house fire. Fire marshal said he overloaded an old oil lamp, even though his trailer had electricity. When they cleared the ash, only one thing survived unburned. A photo of us by that chimney, with tiny dots of green light streaked across the frame, visible even though we took it in daylight. Story 8, Dead Air at Flint Rock Pass. They told us not to camp beyond the 3rd mile marker past Flint Rock Pass. The ranger didn't explain why, just circled the trail on our map, tapped the edge, and said, "If the birds stop, you turn around. Don't wait." I wish we'd listened. It was the summer of 2022. Me and my friend Jonah, 2 amateur photographers trying to build our portfolio with nighttime long exposures. Flint Rock Pass, nestled in the Black Mountains near Mount Mitchell, has an elevation that catches rolling fog in a thick, moss-covered forest that makes it look like time forgot it. Around 1 a.m., we set up our cameras near a massive split boulder nicknamed the Watcher's Seat by local folklore. According to an old Cherokee tale, the boulder marked a spiritual barrier. Beyond it, spirits watched and waited. We laughed about it. Jonah had just started filming when everything stopped. Stopped. No bugs, no owls. Even the distant stream went eerily mute, like water itself held its breath. The silence was crushing. Our breath felt louder than it should. Then a pressure pushed on our ears like a plane descending too fast. Jonah whispered. "Do you feel that?" Before pointing toward the boulder. Something moved behind it, something tall. But the weirdest part, it didn't move like a person. It shifted, then reset. Like bad video buffering. My camera, mid-exposure, suddenly snapped off. The tripod collapsed sideways on its own, lens cracking. That's when I saw them. Not one, but a line of tall, black silhouettes where the trail should have been. They weren't walking. They were swaying like pendulums, perfectly timed, in sync. Jonah bolted, but I couldn't. I was paralyzed by the sound that followed, a low mechanical ticking that echoed from all around, like hundreds of clocks in the woods ticking out of phase. When I turned, the silhouettes were gone. But one stood directly in front of me now, face inches from mine, featureless, but vibrating like a static-filled screen. The next second, I was flat on the ground near our camp, daylight breaking. Jonah was screaming in his tent. He wouldn't stop until I shook him. Later, when we checked his GoPro, only the audio recorded. What played back made us freeze. A perfect minute of absolute silence. Until the faint ticking began. Then, a voice whispering, "You stayed too long past the line." The ranger, when we showed him, turned pale and erased the audio. "You're lucky," he muttered. "Others didn't come back sane." Since then, neither of us has camped again. But sometimes, just before I fall asleep, I still hear that ticking in the back of my head, like something waiting to count down again.